evening, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Vargas. We begin tonight with the headlines from President Trump's trip to Asia. In a nutshell, the odds of a full-blown trade war have decreased, while the odds of a full-blown nuclear war may have just edged a tiny bit higher. President Trump is back at the White House tonight after a jam-packed six-day trip. And the dealmaker-in-chief says he did not come back empty-handed. Trump announced he struck a one-year trade truce with Chinese President Xi when they met in South Korea, their first face-to-face meeting in 6 years. The big takeaway, the U.S. will cut fentanyl-related tariffs on China by 10%. In exchange, China will crack down on the chemicals used to make fentanyl. And in good news for farmers, China also promised to resume buying billions of dollars worth of soybeans. But all the smiles and handshakes came on the heels of an ominous announcement the president put out on Truth Social just minutes before that high-stakes meeting. Trump ordered the resumption of nuclear weapons testing immediately. Here's what the president told reporters as he flew back to the U.S. on Air Force One.
About resuming nuclear testing, what prompted you to do that right before
Well, that
the
had
meeting?
nothing to do with them. It had to do with others. They seem to all be nuclear testing.
Russia?
We have more nuclear weapons than anybody. We don't do testing. We've halted it many years ago. But with others doing testing, I think it's appropriate that we do also.
Now, according to the Arms Control Association, Russia actually has the biggest nuclear arsenal, 5,600 warheads, compared to 5,200 in the U.S. China has about 600. And it is unclear what Trump means by testing nuclear weapons. His comments come after Russia recently tested a nuclear-powered missile and a nuclear-powered torpedo drone launched from a submarine and capable of triggering a radioactive tsunami along the American coast. The Russians helpfully released an AI video showing how it would work. But none of those tests actually involved detonating nukes. The U.S., Russia, and China haven't gone that far since the 1990s. North Korea conducted the most recent nuclear detonation during Trump's first term in 2017. But even the North Koreans have announced a moratorium on such testing. Trump's nominee for the head of U.S. Strategic Command testified today before senators, and he walked back the idea that any of these tests would involve actual detonations.
In a test regimen, but I wouldn't presume that the president's words meant nuclear testing. I believe the quote was, "Start testing our nuclear weapons on an equal basis." Neither China or Russia has conducted a nuclear explosive test. So I'm not reading anything into it or reading anything out to it.
All right, let's get reaction now from our panel. Retired General Wesley Clark is the former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. And Chris Cillizza is a NewsNation political contributor and senior advisor at DGA Group. Great to have both of you here. General, I'm going to start with a couple questions to you. Trump was asked where these tests would happen, and he said, quote, "It will be announced soon. We have test sites." How would a nuclear test even happen right now?
Well, presumably, if you were going to really use a nuclear explosive, you'd have to bury it underground. So you've got to prepare the tunnel site. So it's several, maybe 1,000, 2,000 feet underground. You've got to go through a whole checklist of processes, reviews, areas of safety, et cetera, training of people. It's not going to happen overnight. 2-3 months would be extraordinary to do it that rapidly. And that's if you're going to do an underground test. Now, we haven't done any above ground tests since the early 1960s because it scatters radioactive elements all over. I mean, you just wouldn't do that. But so I'm not sure that the president meant we were going to test nuclear explosives. I think people are misinterpreting what he said.
Yeah, well, he said we're going to do what the others are doing, which is testing nuclear weapons, but the other nations are not, in fact, actually exploding or detonating nuclear warheads. Nobody has done that.
Right. No, we test nuclear weapons all the time. When you fly a B-52 or a B-1 or a B-2, or in some cases an F-16 in Europe, that's a nuclear delivery vehicle. So they're tested all the time. When you're when our submarines are underwater, they're carrying long-range missiles. That's a test constantly going on and check for that. We're just not exploding things. So I understand that the distinction here is that Russia has, they have a nuclear engine in this cruise missile, and they have a nuclear propellant in the torpedo. And that means you could still have a radiation leak and a nuclear accident without ever having an explosive.
Oh, great.
That is dangerous.
Yeah, super dangerous. Chris, why do you think Trump posted this minutes before he walked into a room with Chinese President Xi?
Well, putting yourself in Donald Trump's brain is not a healthy. I don't know his motivation. I will say this though, Elizabeth. It's very rare that there are coincidences in politics and policy. It seems odd to me that Donald Trump would just randomly decide that a few minutes before meeting with the president of China, he would post this. I actually find it very reassuring to hear the general talk about his belief of what Donald Trump meant, or at least what military people within the Trump administration will determine and interpret what he meant. I do think it is important to remember, time after time after time, we think Donald Trump is playing six-dimensional chess. He's almost never playing six-dimensional chess. The truth of the matter is, my guess is he heard someone say Russia tested a nuclear device, and he thought, well, we're not going to be behind them on that, and he reacted. You know, I mean, now it's up to the sort of military folks and the national security folks to sort that out, and I hope their clear heads prevail, but I don't think he had a specific, okay, we're going to do this testing in this place in mind. He very rarely does that on anything.
Yeah, and by the way, the protests from the state of Nevada were undoubtedly, if it was going to happen, it would happen. The last underground test was in Nevada. It would be a huge outcry there. General, if as Chris is right, listen, regardless of what he meant by posting this warning and then speaking about it later when he was flying home, it sparked reaction. Russia has warned that it will start exploding nuclear devices as well if the U.S. does it. The Kremlin spokesman said today if the U.S. abandons the moratorium, Russia will act accordingly. China, for its part, called on the U.S. not to do this. So this definitely got the attention of both Russia and China.
Yes, and I think to answer Chris's point, I think when he was walking in to see President Xi and someone said something about the Russian nuclear torpedo, I think he said, you know, this is the right time to say it. I'm not going to go into
with the video that the Russian government helpfully released.
Yeah. So I think it's ricocheting around and being misinterpreted.
Okay, super quick, Chris. I do want to ask you very quickly about the victories that Trump scored on his meeting with the Chinese president. The big one being that China will suspend its limits on rare earth exports to the United States. This is huge. People don't realize it, but we use these rare earth minerals in everything from our cell phones to our cars to our dishwashers to our airplanes. We need them for literally everything.
And you're exactly right. And we in America do not have a ton of the rare earth minerals that produce batteries and all these things naturally. It's why, by the way, I would also note, Donald Trump's deal that he cut with Ukraine, which does have a lot of rare earth minerals. This was several months ago.
That was a big deal.
But to access them does matter, right? I mean, this powers the 21st century economy. There's no question about it. So yes, I would always say the devil is in the details with these things. General Clark knows this a whole heck of a lot better than I do. The devil is in the details. It's Donald Trump and Xi say, okay, we've got this deal. Now it is up to the sort of staff below that to figure out what it actually means.
Right.
But yes, I agree with you. In general, the U.S. needs more access to these rare earth minerals. China has it. It can't hurt us.
All right. General Clark, always great to have you and your expertise on the show. Chris, I need you to stick around to weigh in on our next story, because there's another escalation by the White House tonight. There have been a lot of questions raised this week about the true objective of President Trump's standoff and actions toward Venezuela, and whether regime change is the real goal. If so, we're learning tonight that this has also been a goal of prior administrations. Take, for example, one clandestine plot hatched during the Biden White House. It involves a federal agent with Homeland Security who seized on an opportunity to approach President Maduro's personal pilot. The agent, Edwin Lopez, learned that 2 of Maduro's planes were being serviced in the Dominican Republic. So he went down there, found the planes, narrowed in on Maduro's man, eventually pitching him, asking if he would like to divert Maduro's plane to a location so that U.S. authorities could arrest him. In exchange, the pilot would become a very rich man. Well, despite many attempts, the pilot wouldn't budge. Fast forward to today, and Trump has a $50 million bounty on Maduro's head. He's also increased naval assets in the waters near Venezuela and accelerated deadly attacks on boats, which the U.S. claims are smuggling drugs into our country. There are even reports that the Trump administration has outlined a transition plan involving Venezuela's opposition leader. Well, Phil Gunson is an expert on Venezuela, and he was asked about that on 60 Minutes recently. Phil Gunson's lived in Venezuela now for 26 years. He's a senior analyst at the International Crisis Group. He joins us now, along with, of course, Chris Cillizza. Phil, great to have you on the show. I got to ask, how, you know you're there, you're down there, you see this. How has Maduro managed to hang on so long? The public tried to vote him out. He's had 2 American presidents try and oust him because Trump tried as well in his first term to figure out ways to hack into the cyber system. And yet Maduro still is in power to this day, tonight.
Yes, he's a lot cleverer than he looks. Yeah, he's been in power since 2013. And I suppose if you want, a simple answer to your question, it's because he's had the support of the armed forces. Maduro, of course, is a lot less popular than his predecessor, Hugo Chavez. He's had a lot less money. The economy collapsed, the oil price fell, U.S. sanctions came along. He has needed the military to stand with him. Otherwise, he'd have been overthrown a long time ago. And as you say, I mean, he lost an election by a large margin last year and simply refused to go. If it hadn't been for the military, he would have had to leave.
And yet, again, you're there with this massive military presence right off the shore. People must feel like something's about to happen. The government is holding emergency drills, training like ordinary people for combat. 125,000 soldiers have been mobilized. It feels like that entire country is like waiting with in bated breath.
Yeah, it doesn't really feel like that in Caracas, I have to say. I mean, certainly, yes, you see the militia training from time to time. We hear reports of military deployments in various parts of the country. But if you walk around Caracas or if you travel outside of Caracas, I did a 2-hour trip outside of Caracas last weekend, and really there's no visible security. You wouldn't know that there was anything special going on.
And just super quick, Phil, we're looking at pictures of Maduro out in crowds. He's still appearing out and about. You say the crowds are actually a safety device for him. How so?
Well, that's speculation. I mean, I don't know for certain, but it seems to me that it's logical that he would want some kind of a human shield around him. He may be safer out on the street as he has been, on occasions in recent weeks, or in a hotel, because of the sense that, it would be difficult for the U.S. to attack him if he's, if the collateral damage would be very great.
Chris, how much of this is about drugs? Because, cocaine passes through Venezuela on its way, perhaps mostly to Europe. Not so much to the United States. There's not a lot of drugs produced in Venezuela, but there's some cocaine and marijuana that passes through Venezuela. So how much of this is about drugs and how much of this is about oil, given the fact that Venezuela has the largest reserves of oil in the world?
I don't know the answer, but I would, again, this is sort of like there are no coincidences in politics. There are no coincidences in national security and foreign policy either. I think Donald Trump is not unaware of Venezuela's situation vis-a-vis oil. And the other thing I would note, Elizabeth, and this is more of a, how does this work legally speaking in America? But we are sort of just taking the Trump administration's word that these are boats filled with drugs. Yeah, I mean, like we don't. There's been no
congressional evidence.
There's no evidence. There's no congressional approval. There's no evidence that's provided to Congress. Like even if it's classified, you can provide some of it to Congress. We haven't seen anything. So that's what's hard for me. I'm not assuming that this is trumped up, sorry to borrow that term, but I also think you need evidence. I mean, we are now striking, we are hitting these boats over and over again. Donald Trump has talked about troops by land in Venezuela. So, you know, at some point here, you're going to have to say, well, we need evidence. If we are using American military force to do this, you need proof of what he's saying is correct.
Yeah, and listen, Phil, when we talk about these troops, it's not just the troops. The CIA has now been given the go-ahead to operate inside Venezuela. Senator Rick Scott said, quote, if I was Maduro, I'd be heading for Russia or China. His days are numbered. That sounds pretty ominous.
He does, but if I was a betting man, which I'm not, I would be putting money on Maduro still being there at Christmas and the fleet having sailed away.
Really?
I think what we're looking at is what we're looking at is a phony war. This is a phony war. I mean, with all due respect to the people who have sadly died on, you know, in all these attacks out on the Caribbean. There are people who need a phony war. There are various people who need a phony war. One is the Venezuelan opposition and Senator Marco Rubio, their principal ally in the government. They need a phony war to convince Maduro that there really is going to be a real war, even though they don't intend to put boots on the ground, as the saying goes.
Yeah.
But another person who needs a phony war is Stephen Miller, because it's very useful for Mr. Miller and his anti-immigrant posture to say we're at war with Venezuela and Venezuelan immigrants need to be kicked out under the Alien Enemies Act.
It is definitely interesting what's happening in Venezuela. We will hear more about it, I'm sure, as Congress continues to demand more answers. Phil Gunson, Chris Elizabeth, thank you both. Really appreciate it. All right, coming up for us, the teacher who was shot by her 6-year-old student takes the stand today in court, accusing the school vice president of ignoring warnings that the little boy had a gun. And then later, Harvard astrophysicist and NewsNation regular Avi Loeb will join me on his latest search for alien tech. Is it hiding in plain sight? And why does he think that NASA is hiding critical evidence from the public? The professor's here, and this is a class you don't want to miss. Think of the government shutdown like a power outage. The longer it lasts, the worse things get. A day or so into the power outage, the problem may be no bigger than your ice cream melting in your freezer. But eventually, the problem expands and can include even perhaps looting. So how bad can a government shutdown get? Well, we're soon to find out, as the current shutdown threatens to become one of the longest, if perhaps the longest, in history. We are at day 30, which means 30 days without pay for around 700,000 federal employees who are all still working, including air traffic controllers. And then there's another 700,000 employees who've been furloughed. They're not getting paid and they're not working. Now the shutdown's blast radius is set to expand, impacting 42 million Americans who rely on the government for food assistance. Those SNAP benefits run out tomorrow night for the first time ever. Vice President J.D. Vance addressed that today with a foreboding message that things could get worse before they get better.
The unfortunate reality, and we're starting to see this with our aviation industry, we're going to find out the hard way with SNAP benefits. The American people are already suffering, and the suffering is going to get a lot worse. Not because the President of the United States has failed to make the shutdown painless. He's tried to do everything that he can to make it as unpainless as possible. The reason that pain is coming and the reason it's building is because we're not passing the clean bill to reopen the government. It's a very easy thing to do.
More than 1 million military members were set to miss their paychecks tomorrow. That is until the Trump administration stitched together an 11th hour workaround. Exclusive reporting by Mark Caputo details the accounting acrobatics that were required to pull that off. The president's team raided 3 different funds to make sure our troops got paid. So where are we going and how does this end? Mark Caputo joins me now. Mark, as you reported exclusively today, the military is getting paid. It's quite creative. But Trump is not going to budge. He found the money to pay the military, and he says he won't find the money, however, to pay for food stamps or SNAP.
Yeah, the White House line, and I'm not going to take a position on who's right here because this relies partly on just the reading of the law, is that he has the ability to fund the military because past practice dating back to George Washington, gives the president the ability to declare an emergency and spend money without going forward with the congressional appropriations process. That is, he can spend money and move money around without the approval of Congress. Whereas, they argue, SNAP, food stamps are a different matter. It doesn't fall under the commander-in-chief's military powers, and he sort of has his hands tied more. That's their official position. Now, whether people want to buy it or not, who knows? But the reality is that Donald Trump views the military as being not only, of all great importance for the commander-in-chief, but also is a major political issue as well.
Yeah.
That is, as long as he can keep the military finance and the troops paid and these other constituencies go without, the White House believes it just puts more and more pressure on Democrats to fund the government, vote for what they call a clean continuing resolution, and end the shutdown.
Well, 24 states are suing the Trump administration over its refusal to fund food stamps. There is money that has been approved by Congress in an emergency fund for SNAP. Today, a judge actually said in that hearing, I don't understand. If this money is there, Congress has put the money in an emergency fund. It's hard for me to understand how this isn't an emergency.
Well, they say it's not an emergency because the emergencies are for cataclysms such as tornadoes and hurricanes and floods and the like. Again, that's the White House's position. This is going to be litigated quite a bit, perhaps up to the Supreme Court. I'm not sure.
Red states that voted for Trump have a higher than average number of people on food stamps. Isn't this going to hurt his own supporters?
You would think so. I'm not sure what the actual polling is by sort of voter selection, or better said, candidate selection of the 42 million people. But I think it's safe to say that it hurts a lot of people. And it's not, despite the really wretched commentary you see on social media from some people, a bunch of freeloaders. A lot of people who are on food stamps and on SNAP are the working poor. These are people employed at places like Walmart, which gets away with, not just Walmart, but employers like that get away with paying such low wages that their employees not only are getting food stamps and public assistance, but they also qualify for Medicaid, which is also another program that is struggling as well.
Yeah, it's important to note, because you're right, there's a lot of awful things being said on social media. The vast majority of people who get food assistance, who get SNAP, are working. They have jobs. The salaries that they're earning are just too low to afford to feed themselves and their families. Listen, Saturday is also the same day that Americans start getting their insurance premium bills, and many who are insured through the Obamacare Act, Affordable Care Act, are going to see premiums skyrocket. This feels like a game of chicken between the Democrats and the Republicans. Here's what I don't understand, and maybe you can explain it. Why don't Democrats just say, okay, let's open the government back up, let's vote on expanding, the extension of the subsidies, and if the Republicans vote it down, the midterms are next year. I don't understand why they've taken this position. Can you help me understand this?
Well, the shutdown in and of itself, earlier in the year, the Senate Democrats had an opportunity to do it, and Chuck Schumer didn't want to do it because he said that they would lose and that it would empower an executive that, in their view, is too regal. That is, the No Kings rallying cry that you heard from the protests.
Yeah.
When a shutdown is closed, you see an executive is able to move money around the budget in some cases to sort of circumvent Congress. And, if you're against kings or a Caesar, this helps empower that Caesar. So yes, you fast forward to now, what are they doing? Good question. Our best available evidence is that the Democratic base is just very upset with their politicians. They think they're not fighting hard enough, and they wanted to see them fight. But to your point, you now have the possibility of these sort of 22 million people who are facing their Affordable Care Act subsidies skyrocketing as a result of expiring COVID-era protections or a boost in their subsidies. You see those 22 million people pitted against the 42 million people on SNAP.
Right.
And the question is, pardon the pun, at what point is there a snap? At what point is there a breaking point? And it looks like we're rapidly heading to that.
Yeah, I don't know who.
I should add, there are now 3 unions, Teamsters, the American Federation of Government Employees, and the Airline Pilots Association, or the Airline Pilots Union, I should say. All of them are saying that Democrats that there should be a clean
reopen.
CR.
Yeah.
And therefore that means that they believe that Senate Democrats should vote that way.
At some point, it feels like, to what end? Except pain pain for everybody, pain for tens of millions of Americans. Mark Cafuto, great reporting today. Great to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, coming up for us. The teacher who survived being shot by her 6-year-old student is demanding justice. Could a vice principal at the school have prevented the attack? We've got more of the emotional testimony when we come back. For the past 700 years or so, bad eyesight has been easy to fix with a pair of these. And right now, we might just be living through a similar revolution with obesity, as the number of Americans taking GLP-1 medications like Zebound and Wegovy is higher than ever. Adult obesity peaked in 2022, hitting a record high of 39.9%. Today, that is down to 37%. Now, that might not sound like much at first, but that represents 7.6 million Americans who are no longer considered obese, and it's only been 3 years. So could we be approaching the day when being overweight is as easily fixed as being nearsighted? Joining us now is NewsNation Now weekend anchor Anna Koyman, who is also a certified personal trainer and host of the NewsNation digital show Working It Out. So Anna, this is a pretty dramatic increase when you remember that obesity can lead to almost all the leading causes of death in this country.
Yeah, a lot of chronic disease. You're right, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for having me on tonight. So the headline we're talking about here, obesity rates going down as GLP-1 use goes up, way up. It sounds like a solid victory, but as a fitness professional myself, I see this as a complicated victory, right? Because weight loss is not the same thing as fat loss. And my concern is that in a few years, we may have a very frail American population because patients are losing muscle tone too. I'll explain all that in a minute. But first, let's take a look at these numbers once again. So the national obesity rate down to 37% now. Yay, down from its peak in 2022 at about 40%. These numbers are still very high. It is a meaningful decline though, and it tracks right alongside in the doubling in the use of GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy. So in February of 2024, 5.8% of American adults reported using them. It is now 12.4% reporting having used them. So the biggest obesity improvements that we're seeing are in adults between the ages of 40 and 64, and the trend is more prevalent in women than men. These are the populations that are using these drugs more as well. In many respects, the GLP-1s are working, but I'm a fitness pro, and no, I am not here to demonize these drugs, but it is important to note that leaning only on these GLP-1s is a short-term fix. We don't know their long-term impacts yet. My concern is that GLP-1s may decrease obesity while also leading to a frail American population. We typically lose muscle and bone density as we age. We know that. And if we aren't exercising with a little bit of impact, think like a light shuffle, light jog, even a lower impact jumping jack, that's good for our bone health. I also noticed that the obesity data that was cited from Gallup is based on BMI or body mass index, and it's based solely on height and weight and not body composition. So, you know, these are all things to really think about. And if we decondition ourselves while we're on these drugs, then we get off the drugs because they're so expensive or we don't like the side effects, Elizabeth, then we don't have that muscle tone in that furnace that's going to be burning the calories that we're eating, and we're deconditioned. So we don't want to even go outside for a walk.
Yeah, and by the way, if you stop taking the drugs, people gain the weight right back, and the drugs actually lead to a loss of muscle mass. So still lots of double sword. Anna Koyman, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, turning now from the weight scale to the scales of justice and the ongoing legal debate over the degree to which adults can be held responsible for the actions of children. In emotional testimony today in a Virginia courtroom, first-grade teacher Abby Zwerner recounted the moment when her 6-year-old student, 6-year-old, pulled out a gun and shot her point blank in the class 2 years ago. Abby Zwerner is suing for $40 million, accusing the vice principal of the school, Ebony Parker, of gross negligence. Parker allegedly did nothing after 4 teachers warned her that the boy had a gun. In her lawsuit, Zwerner says the boy had a long and deeply troubling disciplinary record, even though he was just 6. He was previously suspended from school for choking a teacher. Zwerner says the boy routinely cursed at school staff and threatened fellow students. The shooting clearly took things to a whole nother level. Zwerner was hospitalized for 2 weeks after undergoing 6 surgeries to repair bullet wounds to her hand and her chest. A doctor testified earlier in the trial that a bullet still remains in her chest because it's too dangerous to remove it. So, why did the vice principal do nothing when she was warned that a student had a gun? And is it her fault that the student then shot his teacher? Joining us now is former homicide prosecutor Matt Murphy. Matt, great to have you on. 2 teachers, a guidance counselor, and a reading specialist all went to Ebony Parker's office that day and warned her this 6-year-old boy has a gun. She did nothing. How are her lawyers defending that?
Not very well, I would say. That testimony is just gut-wrenching when you see that. And I'll tell you what, I don't know if she's going to get 40 million, but she's going to get something close to it. The amount of negligence that went into this, Elizabeth, is so shocking. That testimony is real. I'll tell you what, I mean, a 9mm into a lung. I mean, I guess it makes sense since I was a homicide prosecutor. People usually don't survive those, and they had to leave the bullet in there because it's so close to vital blood vessels and things like that. Yeah, there's a concept known as, I'm going to make your attorney viewers have a little PTSD here. There's a concept known as res ipsa loquitur. It's a Latin term that we all get beaten on in law school that basically means this for that. In other words, there's a legal concept that certain things, if they occur, there must be negligence somewhere down the line. The quintessential case is a piano falls on somebody as they're walking down the street. That cannot happen unless there are a series of gross negligence along the way. This is one of those cases. And Ebony Parker, I don't know what these lawyers are thinking. I don't know why they didn't settle this case beforehand. I watched the opening statements with interest, and they are going to lose this lawsuit. They're going to lose it badly. And Elizabeth, in my view, they deserve to lose it.
She says she was busy with standardized testing. I can't, that's more important than a troubled 6-year-old boy with a gun? And by the way,
that's one of, yep.
You know, it's not just the civil suit. A grand jury has also indicted Parker criminally on felony charges after finding her response that day, quote, shocking.
Well, you and I was on your show for a case about a year ago regarding a kid named Ethan Crumbly. You remember this? In Ohio, he went in. He was an older kid, but his parents bought him a gun. And a teacher saw really disturbing drawings. They brought the parents in. Nothing to see here. They left. They refused to take him home, and he shot, I think it was 4 kids and killed them. This reminds me of that case. And look, there are the most ardent Second Amendment proponents that I know were completely fine with the prosecution of those parents.
Right.
As a former prosecutor, I'll tell you what, I would have pulled the trigger on them, pardon the pun. But this is one of those, the mom got prosecuted, she was sent to prison. And this Ebony Parker, this is criminal negligence, a flat out. And she's probably going to do time, and I hate to say it, but she deserves it. I mean, it is outrageous the way she absolutely blew off all of these teachers and all these people. You got a right to go and teach a class without a kid shooting you in the lung. Sorry.
Yeah, it is. It's shocking. I can't fathom doing nothing if I had 4 people come in and say, that little kid's got a gun. We'll have you back and talk about why children who are clearly so disturbed are still allowed in schools like this. Matt Murphy, great as always to have you on the show. All right, coming up for us, did life on Mars spawn life on Earth? Okay, Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb will explain how we're all Martians next. One of the most influential thought leaders in outer space is Harvard professor Avi Loeb. He's not actually in outer space. He just thinks and talks about it a lot. We are proud to call him a friend of the show. Professor Loeb was just on the Joe Rogan podcast this week to talk about, of course, all things extraterrestrial. For those in need of their UFO itch scratched, the professor did not disappoint. We were particularly riveted by his comments on Mars and the theory that all human life on Earth actually comes from the red planet. He's just going home. Professor Loeb wasn't finished. He went on to talk about a Manhattan-sized interstellar object. He's been on the show talking about it a lot. It's called 3I Atlas. It's currently making its way through our solar system, and we've been tracking its progress very closely, especially because Professor Loeb suspects that it might actually be alien technology scoping us out. And for those who like a side order of conspiracy theory with their servings of UFOs, he claims, Avi Loeb does, that NASA is keeping critical evidence about Three Eye Atlas away from public view. Professor Avi Loeb joins me now. What's NASA potentially hiding about Three Eye Atlas?
Well, on October 2nd, the Three Eye Atlas came closest to Mars, within 30 million kilometers. And the high-res camera on board the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter took several images of it. These are the highest resolution images we have. 3 times better in spatial resolution, about 30 kilometers per pixel, compared to the previous best image, which was the Hubble Space Telescope image. And that was a day after the government shutdown took over NASA, and we haven't gotten the data. And my point is that the politics of the day should not sabotage science. They have the data. They should share it with scientists. They can wait with any press release. But for the scientists to analyze the data, that would serve an important purpose of helping us design the future observations of this object. I should also say that the news yesterday was that this object came closest to the sun. And it received a huge amount of heat from the sun. And the latest report indicates that it became extremely bright, much more than expected for familiar comets.
What does that tell you?
Well, that is not the most unusual fact. It actually is bluer than the sun. And a blue color usually indicates very high temperatures if the light is emitted by some hot surface. But the sun is 5,800 degrees Kelvin above absolute zero, and it's very difficult to keep a surface hotter than that. In fact, an object at the distance of Three Eye Atlas from the sun could only be 20 times cooler than the sun, so it should be redder. And any dust.
But so what does that mean, Avi? What does that mean if it's hotter than the sun?
We have another anomaly. The object is bluer than the sun, which we don't fully understand. And as of a few hours ago, the first hint for a non-gravitational acceleration, meaning something is affecting its trajectory beyond gravity, was indicated. And so what I'm telling you is that there are new facts about this object that make it even more interesting than it was before. You know, before we knew it moves in the plane of the planets with a very small likelihood. Then we realized that it's very massive, about 1 million times more massive than the first interstellar object, Oumuamua. And then there was nickel with very little iron detected around it, the way we find in industrial production of nickel alloys. And then there was a jet from it towards the sun that was also anomalous. And then there was polarization from it that was never seen before for comets. So there are all these indications.
Bottom line, there's a lot that is making you continue to be very intrigued, a lot about this thing that makes it look like it might be something not quite natural, but we don't know yet. Avi Loeb, come back once we get that NASA image. And also, I'd love to hear more from you about why you think maybe we all originated on Mars, but we'll leave that to another night. Avi Loeb, great to have you on. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, coming up, Chris Cuomo joins me live next. All right, welcome back. We are just seconds away from Chris Cuomo starting his show. Whoa, what's going on? What have you got? What is this? I've been out sick the last few nights. I haven't seen the, is that a goatee?
Elizabeth, are you trying to hurt my feelings right now?
I'm just asking.
Is that what you're doing?
Is there some, is it dirt or is it hair?
See, do you see this? Can you see this, what I'm doing right now? It is Movember. That's what this is. I'm about to explain at the top of the show if you're done insulting me.
I would never insult you. I'm just teasing you because that's what friends do.
Can't say that anymore.
That's what friends do. We tease each other. As you do me all the time.
I can't wait until you're unshaven and I point it out.
I will go to the Lady Ludmilla waxing salon before I show up on air with a, facial hair.
You're beautiful no matter what you do. Elizabeth, I love you. I got to jump.
Have a good show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.